If you're a married man and you've ever apologized for something you know damn well you didn't do just to keep the peace, then this video is for you because that one habit is destroying you and you don't even see it yet. Today on Men's Midlife Clarity, I'm going to talk to the married guys. This channel is all about tough love and telling it like it is, but since I'm a single guy, I was married for 15 years. Instead of telling you what you guys might be doing wrong right off the bat, I think that I'm going to tell you about my situation and where I found myself in my own marriage, how I got there, and some of the lessons that I learned and things that you guys might can do differently. The whole point of this is that a lot of married men, and myself, I include very much in this, over the years, even if they don't start out that way, allow their wife to wear the pants in the family. There's a lot of different reasons for this, and it happens over time. It doesn't usually just happen overnight. But if you would like to have the kind of life you want as an alpha or a sigma man, meaning not a beta, then you were going to have to figure out how to reclaim your authority in the marriage. Started out very much as the backbone of the relationship. I was doing all of the things that usually help you catch a woman in the first place, like being fairly self-assured, confident, not kissing her ass, not being afraid to tell her no, all of those sorts of things. So I started out in the right frame because I had been in that frame for over a decade as a single man. This was my first marriage, and over the years, I figured out that I allowed myself to just gradually let her be in control and be the boss of me. And it's not quite that simple, but that's where I ended up. I ended up in a place where myself and my two daughters, we were trained, we were conditioned so that mommy's happiness was everybody. She was going to make sure that everybody else was miserable. And I allowed that to happen. I allowed it to come into being. So what are some of the things and some of the reasons that guys fall victim to this after they get married? I'm going to blame a lot of it on social conditioning and on society in general. If you go watch any cartoon, especially a sitcom of any kind that has a family with a dad in the picture, 9 times out of 10, the father is portrayed as an idiot. He's a bumbling moron. He's just another child that the mother has to take care of. The mom is the only one that has any sense, that has any responsibility, that's capable of getting anything done. You know what I'm talking about. The Berenstain Bears, Berenstein, Stain, however you say it, is a prime example of this. I had a good friend of mine point out several years ago that they didn't read their kids the Berenstain Bears because of the very reason that Papa is portrayed in the way I'm talking about. In just about every story, Papa is just as dumb and irresponsible and needs just as much looking after and supervision as the kids do. So there's that aspect of it. And this has kind of been the outlook of society at large for a long time. And I'm not saying that men haven't contributed to this in some degree, but it can't possibly be true to the degree that it is portrayed in society and in media that all men are morons or completely irresponsible. Now, let me say this. If you're the oafish husband who stands there looking at his phone while his wife is getting the kids loaded in the car and the car seats in and getting everything taken care of, and you're not doing what you're supposed to do, then you need to get yourself situated. All of this information and this advice on these ideas on what to do different are based on the fact that you are doing what you're supposed to do as a man and a husband. Not perfection, that's never the goal, but you're doing the big things. You should be doing the important stuff to help take care of your wife and your kids and your family. You should be a man. You should be handling your business. Another aspect that has contributed to this current paradigm we're in is regarding men is, of course, feminism and all of its ills. But a lot of the responsibility does rest on our shoulders as men because we've allowed this to happen instead of, number one, doing everything that we're supposed to do to have a moral framework to operate from. But we allow it to happen instead of fighting back and pushing against it. And believe me, I know firsthand how miserable a woman can make your life if she wants to. It's better if you're a young guy just starting out, just married or about to get married. It's a whole lot easier to establish and maintain your frame of authority and control early on. And hear me when I don't mean authority in a domineering or overbearing way. When I say authority and control, I mean it in a healthy masculine way where the man is designed to be the leader of the marriage. It doesn't mean that you're a wife beater or that your, quote, old lady doesn't get to say anything about, have an opinion about anything or any of that. But I do just want to clarify, I mean authority and leadership in a positive, healthy way. So it's a lot easier and certainly a lot better to establish that frame and hold it than it is to try to regain it after you've lost it. But to try to regain it again after it's gone is then going to be a whole lot more difficult. It's going to take more time. It's going to take more planning and effort. and you're basically going to have to strategize your way back into it slowly. If you just walk in and come at it with the attitude and tell her, okay, baby, today's a new day and daddy's in charge now, that's not going to go very well for you. You're not going to be able to undo the years of allowing her to be in control and take control. You're not going to be able to undo all of that overnight. It's going to take time, and you're going to have to do it a little bit slowly. So start out with that and maintain the frame if you can. But consider all of the reasons that a lot of guys have gotten to this point in their marriage. And it's not necessarily your fault. I mean, ultimately, it is your fault and my fault because we allow it to happen. But this doesn't happen in a vacuum. I was in Nashville last summer for a company event for 3 days. And one morning I went down to the hotel lobby and they had a little coffee bar. I think it was a Starbucks. And the line was pretty long, but I wanted a coffee and I didn't have anything else to do. So I was standing there in line and had been standing there probably about 10 or 12 minutes. And I noticed this guy in front of me who looked like he was probably in his mid-50s, and he was 2 or 3 people ahead of me in line. And he was already there when I walked up, so I don't know how long he'd been there, but it was longer than I had been, obviously. He had one person left in front of him, and then it was going to be his turn. And so a woman comes marching into the lobby, and I assume it was his wife because they argued like married people and they were both wearing wedding rings. So she comes downstairs and walks right up in front of him, in front of, 15, 20 people in the line, and starts reading him the riot act. And I couldn't hear exactly what she said, but it was something along the lines of, "What are you doing? You don't need coffee. We can get coffee later. Let's go." And I just watched this interaction, and I could see the frustration on this man's face. He wanted a cup of coffee. He was 15 minutes invested into waiting in line, and he had 1 or 2 minutes left to go, and she just had to be in charge. She had to come down there and set him straight and have her way and tell him like it was. This is a grown man. He threw up his hands and walked off in exasperation. And the first thing I thought was, boy, do I know what that feels like. And my second thought immediately after was, I will never, ever go there again. If you're standing in line as a grown-ass man to get a cup of coffee, you don't need to let your wife come tell you that we have to go right now just because that's what she wants. If it's not an emergency and somebody doesn't have a limb hanging off and we're on the way to the hospital, then I don't want to hear it. And so many guys allow themselves to fall into this trap, and it's because we know that the woman can make us miserable if they want to. But again, I have to say that's only the case, and it's only they can't make us miserable if we aren't there for them to do it. And if we don't allow them to get in the habit of just telling us what to do like we're another one of their children, then we relinquish all of our power and all of our authority and your status as a man in the marriage. You relinquish that just to get along. Because once you start doing that, you'll have to do it for the rest of the marriage, or you're going to have to go through the very difficult process of trying to break out of that, which is a lot harder on the back end. I think there are a lot of men in this situation who maybe don't even realize it yet, that they are in that situation. In fact, I was driving my mom home from Savannah to Atlanta after she stayed with us. This was several years ago. And at some point, she just turned to me and said, "Jason, do you do everything in your house? Does your wife do anything other than sit around and watch TV and boss people around and read her trashy books?" And she proceeded to list for me the things that she had observed, and that she observed me doing all of the caring for the children, doing all of the cooking, doing all of the cleaning, while my wife sat on her ass. And it had happened so incrementally and over such a long, drawn-out period of time that this was one of the first times where I really, truly realized exactly where I was and how bad I had allowed things to get and become. And so the question then becomes, all right, so now you're there. Now that you recognize what the situation is, what do you do about that? Once you find out and you figure out that you're allowing your wife to be in charge and to dominate you, how do you go about getting out of that? How do you go about reclaiming your authority and your position of leadership in the marriage? It may not necessarily be that the wife just set out to become the boss. Maybe you as a man have gotten so passive and just relinquished control, so much control to her over the years, that she's just had to step up and take charge. And if you go along to get along, to avoid conflict at any cost, then you are teaching her, you are training her over time that she has to step up and make the decisions, that she is in charge because you aren't. You defer to her even though she may not present it that way. And even though in the moment you really just don't want to argue with her, and you know that whatever you say is going to cause a fight, you just don't want to deal with it. But even in that case, you are creating the situation and you are continuing the pattern. You're taking the easy way out because you're confusing peacekeeping with leadership. And if you just say, whatever you want, honey, whatever you think, that's fine. If you do that all the time and you're in the habit of apologizing when you haven't done anything wrong, and this is huge, if you apologize to keep the peace when you truly believe that you've not done anything wrong, this is a huge indication that you have abdicated all of your authority and all of your position as a man in the marriage. You are actually apologizing for something that you truly don't believe you did wrong. But what this does, again, is it trains her to think that she is always right. So it's a trap that you really have to watch out for. And don't outsource the family decisions. Don't outsource your authority over to her. If you do, she'll get used to making the decisions and being in charge, and she'll step up and do it every time. I'll give you an example from my own marriage. My ex-wife was fairly talented and at interior decorating and picking colors and patterns and schemes and all of that. I'm not good with any of that stuff. So when she picked out a color to paint the walls or picked out a bedspread or whatever, I didn't really care because it wasn't important to me. Now, if it had been something I'd really hated, I would have just said pick something else. And it's okay to defer to her on those kinds of things, the things that are in her wheelhouse, the things that she cares the most about that don't matter to you. In other words, you have to pick your battles. But in the other areas, in the important areas where you have a really strong feeling and an opinion about what needs to be done, my idea of a healthy marriage is that the husband has to have the final say because somebody has to be in charge, and the dynamics of male and female society, that's just the way it goes. And men and women are very different, and we need very different things. For any of you that are listening to this, I would imagine that you are the kind of person. I don't believe that any man that's listening to a podcast about how to gain clarity in midlife and about fostering personal growth, I don't think you're listening to this if you're not the kind of man who wants to be the authority figure in your own marriage and retain your power as a man. And if you don't want to be in charge, if you want to just let her take the reins, then hats off to you. As long as that's a conscious decision, fine, do that. But I'm talking to the man who has not made that decision. He has not decided that. He does not want his wife to be the leader in the family. He wants to retain the position of leadership as a man. I'm talking to the man who has not made that decision. This next one is big. It's emotionally loaded and it's an intense topic. But if sex in your marriage is broken, if it has become a system of barter, a carrot and a stick, in other words, a system of punishment and motivation, if your wife treats sex as a reward system for you doing the things she wants you to do or not doing what she doesn't want you to do, whether it's a honey-do list or just behaving like she wants you to, then you're in a very tough spot, my friend. If sex has become a reward and punishment system and you have allowed that to happen, it is very tough to get out of that. You have to find a way to stop this because sex is not a reward. It is not a punishment. It's a very integral and important part of any romantic relationship. Men need it, women need it, and if one of you is doling that out or withholding access only as a reward or a punishment, if she promises you sex because you do the things, something that she asks you to, a honey-do list, then this is a major problem and you have to eliminate this. And listen, if sex is something that's important to you, and it is to most men, it's a biological and an emotional need for all humans that are in relationships. It shouldn't be the end-all, be-all. But it's just like the kitchen in your house. It's not the only room I'm interested in. It's not the only one I use, but it's not a whole house without it, and I don't want to live in a house without one. Sex is the same way. If you have a wife or a partner who's using that as a weapon, a bartering chip, a punishment, then you have to fix that. And I would say it's so important. You need to go ahead and decide right now. You need to have the mindset that if you can't fix this, you need to know if you can't bring the sex back into some resemblance of normalcy and something that works for both of you, and your wife is going to continue to use it as a punishment, you need to decide right now whether you are willing to stick around for the rest of your life for that relationship before you even try to fix anything else, because there's a chance that you won't be able to fix that. And then you've got to know what you're going to do. You need to decide before you get there. You need to know whether you're willing to put up with that for the rest of your life or not. And if you can't fix the sex part, if that's a deal breaker for you,
then you don't need to worry about any of the other improvements we're talking about, unless the one caveat to that is that if you're not doing what you're supposed to as a man, then you've got to do that first before you can expect your wife to be sexually attracted to you. If you're not handling your business and acting like a man, your wife's not going to want to sleep with you. And that's just the way it is. But there's no point in working on all these other things if you can't fix that. And I would say just as important as the sex is blatant disrespect. If your wife talks down to you and says demeaning things to you on a regular basis, I would seriously question whether this marriage or this relationship is even worth saving. Is she even somebody that you want to save a marriage with at this point? Because if she's talking to you in a demeaning way, she has lost respect for you, and that is, and she probably resents the fact that you exist if she treats you that way. At some point, you have to decide what you're willing to live with, and you have to decide what you're willing to put up with. And if you're going to stay with a woman who withholds affection or is blatantly disrespectful to you, if she doesn't have any respect for you, she may not be the person that you thought she was, and it may not be worth trying to save. Now, I realize that this gets extremely complicated, and this is where things are very different for married men than they are, say, single guys who are dating or even in a long-term relationship who aren't married, especially if you have kids, especially if you have a home involved. You can't just break up like you did if you were dating. You can't do that. And you aren't going to make the decision to leave your marriage nearly as easily as you would leave a girlfriend or a dating relationship. I was in that position. I lived for many years in misery, having lost, given up my power, still holding on a foolish hope that my ex was going to change. And it was so bad that I would have been I stayed there long enough that I would have been a fool to stay a minute longer. I kept waiting for things to change. I held out hope. I didn't want to break up my family. I didn't want to get divorced. I didn't want to sell my home and property. I had a gorgeous homestead in the foothills of the mountains that I had worked for years. It had been my life's dream, and I had it. I didn't want to get rid of that. I didn't want my kids to have a broken home. I didn't want any of that. I certainly didn't expect or want to be ejected into the single life at 44 years old. That was the last place I ever thought I was going to be. That was not where my head was at all. And before things got so bad, I was a very content, very happily married family man. I loved my life. And then things just kept getting worse and worse in so many important areas that I would have been an absolute fool to stay any longer. So I get it. You don't make that decision lightly. But you also shouldn't sit in a bad marriage or a miserable life for decades. We only get one spin on this planet. As far as we know, we get one life. And every minute that you're sitting there in misery is a minute that you could be working your way out of it and moving toward a different, better life. I don't know your circumstances. Hell, some of this may be your fault. And if you're more at fault than your wife is, then you need to be honest with yourself. This is not about scoring points or winning an argument or proving who's right or wrong. This is about looking at yourself with a cold, hard introspection and figuring out how much of your marital problems are your fault and figuring out how much abuse you were willing to put up with out of your spouse. It is not easy, and there is a steep learning curve in getting back into that in 2026. And I know a lot of women are guilty of this. I see it all over the internet. The woman is all of a sudden her husband's not sexy enough, or he doesn't give her enough attention, or he doesn't make enough money. And the magazines and the internet and all her girlfriends are saying, oh, girl, just leave him. I know there are a lot of women that have thought that way. And a lot of them have really figured out that it's a lot harder than what they think. They think they're going to go out and just find some Christian Grey character to take them on the adventure of a lifetime. And it just doesn't work that way. I'm friends with a lot of single women, and they are figuring out that going out and finding another good man is not as easy as they think it is. And it doesn't work that way for men either. If you go out and try to find your next person, another partner, and I know this is, way in the future if it gets to that, but it's easy to go out and have some fun. It's easier to do that as a 40 or a 50-year-old man than it is as a woman. But don't think that you're going to run out and then within a year or two replace a spouse or a partner, because it really is a lot tougher than you think. And I get a lot of dates, but listen, I'm at the point now, and this is not a brag, this is not a boast. I reject just as many women these days as women reject me. And again, that doesn't mean that I'm arrogant or that I'm anything special. I'm a regular dad bod, single dad. I'm nothing special. But I tell you what, I have learned to respect myself enough not to put up with all the crap that's out there. So don't put up with disrespect or bad behavior from your partner or your wife, and don't be the one that gives it either. Be the kind of man who does not deserve disrespect. You have to be prudent and responsible. You have to take part in decisions and step up. You cannot avoid confrontation just to keep the peace, and you can't have her way just to avoid a conflict or an argument. You can't apologize when you haven't done something wrong. And listen, it is okay for her to be upset with you. I used to get caught in this trap that I thought, oh no, she's mad at me. The earth is going to stop spinning. Don't do that. I used to get into that frame of mind, and I know I have been programmed and trained this way, but it happens slowly over time, methodically. You can't apologize when you haven't done something wrong. And as I said, slowly I just woke up and began to realize that I had relinquished all of my authority and all of my power in my marriage as a man. I had thrown it down at her feet. So I'm very guilty of this, and I don't come at this as telling you what to do, because this is very much a learn from my mistakes, right? I learned the lesson, and I learned it well, and I will never be in that position again. I have spent the last 5 years learning to be comfortable with my own company, learning to enjoy my peace and my solitude. I can go out on dates if I want. I can go hang out with friends if I want. And if I spend the rest of my life without being in a relationship, I'm still going to go out on dates, if you know what I mean. And that's just fine with me at this point. So I'm not giving all of that up. I will never put myself in that position again, because I'm not going to learn that lesson again. It's too hard to learn. Tell me what you think. If you're a married guy, what is your experience? Have you had any of this happen, or is it easy for you to maintain the authority in your marriage? Do you think that it's beginning to happen? Let me know what you guys think. Or if you feel like you have been conditioned and brainwashed to allow her to make the decisions. And again, I'm not faulting you, because all of the world, all of society is pushing us in this direction to let women run all over us. But let me know what you think in the comments. Go grab the next video, and we'll catch you guys on the flip side.